Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Welcome back to number 70, episode number 70. 30 more episodes till 100, guys. It's coming. I mean, 30 weeks is a long time, but, you know, if we release some on back-to-back days like we did with the DCE rewatch a while ago in December, you never know. 100 might be right around the corner. Anyways, guys, not to get off on a, tangent about that kind of stuff. Thank you so much for joining again for another episode. It is episode 70, and we have some things to talk about, guys. We always have some things to talk about, but Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars. So the Electric State press tour has been the gift that keeps on giving. And while the movie is not the gift that keeps on giving, we've gotten a lot of little tidbits here and there about Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, of course, talking about Daredevil Born Again as well, and Punisher, and all the good stuff that relates to that. So lots of things to touch upon here, guys. Before we get into it, as always, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so. Give this video a like and let me know in the comments what you think about any of the topics. I'd love to interact with you guys. I try to respond to every single comment, and so please make sure to just leave your thoughts and we'll have a conversation there. And if you're interested, or if you are listening on the audio-only platforms, that is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast, those links are in the descriptions. As always, make sure to leave a rating and let me know what you think about the podcast in the comments section, or leave a DM, send an email, all that kind of good stuff. Let me know. And without further ado, guys, let's get into today's segments. Alrighty, guys, this was not originally in the plans. This was not originally a part of any videos or segments on the YouTube channel that I was going to do. But I kind of figured, as I took a step back, because we've been doing look-backs, we've been doing retrospectives or rewatches or whatever you want to call them for all sorts of different things. And while the DCEU one is on hold for a little bit, and that's just because, I've been, there's been enough to talk about in the meantime. And it will eventually come back once I need a break or once there's a little bit of a lull. Of course, we'll get back to, I think it's Justice League that we're on now, and then Aquaman. So we'll definitely get back to it. But in terms of rewatches and retrospectives, I personally was just, and I've been alluding to this previously, I've been alluding to this in prior segments of the Access Blockbusters pod, that I have been, just for my own enjoyment, rewatching the original Daredevil series, the first 3 seasons on Netflix. I wasn't planning on doing Defenders. I don't think I will. I think I'll just probably watch a YouTube summary of it before going into season 3, just to refresh my memory. But I watched the first couple episodes right before Daredevil Born Again. So glad that I did, for, I think, fairly obvious reasons. For those of you who haven't seen the show, I think if you do see the show, it'll be pretty obvious as to why. But, I just thought, okay, so I think that's been helpful, and let's just keep going. And I think it has been super helpful. For example, there's a quick scene, or there's a quick line where BB Urich in Daredevil Born Again, it's minor spoilers for the show, comes in, and she's the niece of Ben Urich, right? The journalist. And at the time, I hadn't finished season 1 of Daredevil. And so I was watching this scene, and Kingpin, was introduced to this girl, or this young woman, and she says, "I'm BB Urich, I'm the niece of Ben Urich, and you knew him." And Kingpin says something like, "Yes, I did know him." And, at the time, I was just like, oh, I forgot what happened to him. Fast forward a couple weeks, and I'm catching up to the end of season 1 of Daredevil, and I find out what happened between Kingpin and Ben Urich, and I was like, oh, so that line in Daredevil Born Again has way more significance than I remember. Because I'd seen the show before. But, it had been a long time. So, and I guess what we're doing here, this is going to be a very shortened, condensed version of what I usually do for my rewatches, where I talk about the context, talk about my background, why I decided to rewatch it, what I was expecting going in and whatnot. And then we'll kind of just dive in. I haven't taken notes for this particular rewatch, just wanted to give some thoughts on what I loved. Because there's not a lot I didn't like about season 1 of Daredevil. So what I really loved, and what I'm hoping that Daredevil Born Again can continue to take from the original, and of course be its own show, right? I'm not expecting, and I'm not asking for Daredevil Born Again to be this carbon copy of the first 3 seasons. Not at all. But I think there are some things that the first 3 seasons did so well, and I'm talking about the first season here. I haven't started the second season as of the recording of this segment, so looking forward to that very, very much. But, wanting to talk about that, because I think that, again, some of the things that made us fall in love with this series, I'm hoping that Daredevil Born Again can continue. But anyways, it's been really nice to see those callbacks and to see the connections between these two series, even though they're spiritually part of the same series. So that's been good. And so I went into the season, just saying, let's remember, let's rewatch this. And it's been so much fun. I loved season 1 of Daredevil. One of the interesting things as we dive into the series is I totally forgot that Matt Murdock doesn't get into costume until the last 15, not even 15, 10 minutes of the show. And that's remarkable to me because if you can imagine watching the show originally when it aired, right? And if you're a fan of the Marvel comic books, the showrunners, comic books and movies, I suppose, at the time, because this came out 2015, so right around Avengers 2-ish. So, comic book movies were starting to hit their peak, right? But anyways, you can imagine, right? It's a huge risk to not have Daredevil get in the costume until the very last second, because then you're relying on this guy who's just wearing, just wearing a black shirt and a black bandana over his eyes. And you have to, make that leap of faith if you're the showrunners and if you're the writers, that the audiences are going to connect with him on such a level that it's not going to matter that he doesn't look anything like Daredevil for a while. And it's just this guy running around. He's not costumed. He's not, anything. He's a vigilante. He's Daredevil, but it's Matt Murdock. And I think that was a risk that they knew going into it, but they knew that would pay off because the performances in this series are so good. One of the other things, right, that makes this series tick the way that it does is the chemistry between the characters. And chemistry in a positive sense, right, between Matt and Foggy, where when they start to have their fight towards the end of the season, and once Foggy realizes that that Matt is Daredevil, that you buy into it, you're bummed, you're disappointed because you know that these are two best friends. And that makes, again, some of the events of Daredevil Born Again even harder to watch. Karen, who is a character that didn't have that built-in friendship between these three characters, but comes into the show and really shines a light on just a great character that they had here. A great character, a big bright spot in the lives of Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson, but also Ben Urich and even a side character like Mrs. Cardenas, for example, who tragically dies in the show. But like I said, not just positive chemistry, but I don't even think it's negative chemistry, but chemistry between characters who have animosity towards one another, right? Every time Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk interact, it is scary. It is tense. Every time Kingpin interacts with anybody in this show, and they do such a good job of barely showing him in the first few episodes, and then once they do start showing him around episodes 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then ramping him up towards the finale, every single time he is terrifying. He is beating someone to death. He is screaming at somebody. He has blood on his hands. He's just so intense and so terrifying that by the end of the show, every time Kingpin walks in a room, you're terrified. And that's one of the things that this show does so well. Now, I know Daredevil Born Again is doing something a little bit different, right? Daredevil Born Again has Kingpin in bureaucracy, has Kingpin in government, and he is a different version of Kingpin who I think is trying to believe in, as of the recording of this video, I've only seen 4 episodes, right? But a Kingpin who is trying to restrain himself and trying to do things through the system, through the government. And it's a different version of Kingpin. But I will say that version of Kingpin lacks that oomph that this criminal boss Kingpin has, because this version of Kingpin in season 1, it's like every breath he takes is enough to frighten you. And that's something I miss. And I hope we do get back to that in Daredevil Born Again. I'm not saying we need to right now. I'm just hoping that they're building up to that, right? And it's not just a random fit of violence it's just like, hey guys, remember this is Kingpin, right? Because I think that's what season 1 did so well. The conflicts as well, because ultimately, I know we get more into ninjas and we get more into the hand and whatnot in season 2, and I don't remember loving that. I don't remember hating it either, but we'll have to see. We'll do eventually another rewatch of a Daredevil. We'll do another segment rewatching Daredevil Born Again, or Daredevil season 2, excuse me. And so we'll talk about it then with Elektra and the hand and whatnot. But this season kind of dives into it a little bit with Nobu and the ninjas, but not really, right? Because what this story is at the end of the day, and this show knows it, because they lock Fisk up in jail, but it's about corruption, right? It's about the fact that Fisk, who from the beginning, what I love that this, that the Daredevil revival, Daredevil Born Again, is taking with it from the original series, is that Fisk loves New York City. In a weird, twisted, gross way, he loves New York City, and he wants to do what he believes is right for New York City. In this season, it's through criminal means, it's through back channels, it's through really violent means, but he wants to still improve the city. And in Daredevil Born Again, I guess he's decided to do it the quote-unquote right way, right? And so, this show, that is the arc of the show, is about the city and how, Matt Murdock also loves this city, and it's between these two characters coming to a head at the end of it, right? Where, to where they lock Fisk up, right? It's this whole thing about the system and vigilantism, which again is a big theme of Daredevil Born Again, which I love. But it's this big thing of Matt, Foggy, and Karen are like, we gotta lock him up, and they do. But at the end of the show, they know because Fisk has had all these people under his wing until he escapes. But then Matt is able to take him down because it's really between these two characters, and that final brawl between the two of them exemplifies that to the nth degree. So those are some things I really loved. What else did the supporting characters are really interesting as well. Madame Gao, even Leland. Wesley, I forgot completely about Wesley. I forgot how annoying he is. We never really get an explanation as to why he's so incredibly loyal to Kingpin in season 1. I don't even think he comes up again in season 2 or 3. But it's, I forgot how annoying he was, in the show. And not that I'm glad that any character ever dies, but, I totally forgot about him. Crazy. Mrs. Cardenas, Ben Urich. I'm really sad about what happened to Ben Urich at the end of the season with his death at Kingpin's hands. And yeah, I mean, I watched this show, right? And you see the progression where Matt is struggling. He's like, I have to do this. Oh, Rosario Dawson. I completely forgot about her because she wasn't really in the last few episodes of the season, but Rosario Dawson as Claire Temple, she's great as well. And, I think what's great about this show is that this show is about the struggles of their main characters. It's not just about them punching and kicking each other, right? Which is, it happens, but it's about the struggles of what these characters are going through. Matt trying to really grapple with this identity of, am I going to do this the hard way, the way of the vigilante, or am I going to really be responsible and be a man of the law and do it the way that I think things are supposed to go? Kingpin, how am I going to get to my goals, right? How am I going to do this? And other characters like Stick are prodding Matt along the way. And it's so interesting to see him grow as a character where he, you get backstory of his father, Jack Murdoch, and you get a backstory of Fisk's father, Bill Fisk, and all of it kind of comes together. These two characters, it's so Batman and Joker in an interesting way. And I love seeing that in Daredevil Born Again, where you see that in that diner scene in episode 1, because that's what these characters are. They're the yin and yang, right? Batman and Joker, they're so similar in such strange ways, and so are Daredevil and Kingpin. And there are a lot of Batman parallels, right? The newer versions of the Nolan Batman or whatnot of, this vigilante who's flying around at night and saving people, and the city doesn't really know what to think about him and whatnot. So I think it's really great. So now, heading into a season 2 rewatch, I'm very interested. I remember really liking Elektra and really liking what they did with her. So we'll see if that continues. The ninjas, I'm very curious. Punisher, obviously, I'm very curious. And Fisk in prison. Those are the main things that I remember from season 2. And so we'll see where we go from there. So those are my thoughts revisiting Daredevil season 1. I'm really glad that I did it. And I'm really excited to get to seasons 2 and 3. Season 3 in particular with Bullseye. I'm very curious to see how that connects to the beginning of Daredevil Born Again. So we'll have to see about that. But guys, that was a revisiting of Daredevil Season 1. Have you seen it recently? And what did you think about it? And I would totally recommend it if you guys haven't done a rewatch of Daredevil Season 1 in a long time. Totally would recommend. So make sure to do so. And look forward to hopefully a revisiting of Season 2 sometime in the next, I would say, 3 weeks. I'm hoping to get through it at that time. It's just a show on top of all the other shows and movies I'm watching to keep up with. It's just in the background. The goal is to, before we end the segment, to do revisiting season 2 at some point, and then we'll do revisiting season 3, and then we'll jump into Daredevil Born Again right away. And I'll by that point the whole show should be out, and so I'll just immediately do a rewatch of Daredevil Born Again and see just how it flows, from the original series. So guys, let me know what you think about all of that, and let me know what you thought and what you think about Daredevil season 1 in the comments down below. All right, everyone. Well, I had a lot of fun this Oscar season. This was probably the Oscar season that I was the most engaged in what was going on beforehand, and I was most engaged during the Oscars. I did predictions, and I've done predictions before, but I really made an effort to watch as many of the Oscar movies as I could, and we did a lot of predictions. We did a lot of segments beforehand, so you can go check those out on the Access Blockbusters pod and see that I did pretty well in terms of predictions, and really just had a lot of fun watching these movies, right? That's not to say I enjoyed every single one. Again, go check out my rankings of all the Oscar movies that I watched. I enjoyed some more than others, right? That's totally to be expected because these are just movies and these are pieces of art that, we look at in different ways. And so, but I really enjoyed the whole thing. And one thing that I really enjoyed that, was not related to the movies themselves was the ceremonies themselves. I mean, did anything stand out to me in the sense of, oh my gosh, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen? I mean, other than, and this had nothing to do with what we're about to talk about, now, But other than the Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande singing Defying Gravity on stage, which was mind-blowing to me, it was so good. Which, again, doesn't have anything to do with the host himself, which we're going to talk about in this segment. But, other than that, nothing mind-blowing, nothing just absolutely blow you out of the water. But it was really good. And part of the reason, in fact, a big reason why, I think it was the host, Conan O'Brien. I've thought, by the way, in the past few years that Jimmy Kimmel, another late night talk show host, has done a good job hosting the Oscars. And I wouldn't have been opposed to have him come back and keep doing that for as long as he wanted to. But it looks like his run, I think he did 3. His run is over. And it's amazing because he was in charge of the Oscars that did the whole envelope thing. And that wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault, but it's amazing they asked him back after that. And he did a great job, I think. But I think Conan brings just this chaotic energy that other late night show hosts just don't have. And I love that. He's wickedly funny, no pun intended. He is so smart, and he just doesn't care what people think. He does a whole, song and dance number about not wasting time. It was really funny. And so, with that all out of the way, the announcement is official. Conan O'Brien will at least be coming back for now to do the Oscars one more time. He will be coming back to host the 2026 Academy Awards. 98, I believe. So, wouldn't it be something if Conan O'Brien was still here hosting the 100th Oscars? So that would be really, really fun. But Conan O'Brien is officially coming back to host the next Oscars, and I think this is just in perfect Conan fashion. This is his reaction to it. Quote, "The only reason I'm hosting the Oscars next year is that I want to hear Adrian Brody finish his speech. And if you watch the Oscars, you'll know exactly what he's talking about. If you haven't, go check out Adrian Brody's acceptance speech at your own peril. You might be there for a good long while. So anyways, I just wanted to talk about this because I think this is a really good thing. Again, I don't think that, the Oscars, it was like the best thing of all time other than the first 10 minutes or so, which I thought was amazing. I think that he did a really good job, though. And he did the job of the host to blend in when he needed to blend in, to be funny when he needed to be funny, and to take jabs at people when he needed to take jabs. If you guys have seen those clips from the Golden Globes with Ricky Gervais hosting, that is a whole different level of not caring what people think. And I don't know, it's funny. It's really funny. I don't know if people want that for the Oscars, though. And I think Conan O'Brien is a really good middle ground between Ricky Gervais and Jimmy Kimmel, for example. And I think that energy, I'm really excited to see that again. So this is good news to me, and I'd love to hear what you guys thought. Did you guys watch the Oscars? First of all, the ceremony was pretty long. It's always been pretty long, and I don't know how you condense it that much more. I'm as somebody who enjoys these kinds of ceremonies, 3.5 hours is very long, but it is what it is to me. But let me know what you think about the news that Conan O'Brien is coming back to host the Oscars in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, so while we haven't been talking about it every single week on the channel, I have been keeping up every single week with the Apple TV Plus show Severance, Season 2. Severance was a show, I believe it came out in 2022, and it took the world by storm. It was a very original concept. For those of you who don't know the basic premise, and I also should say before we even get further, I haven't seen the finale of Severance Season 2 as of the recording of this segment. I'm going to see it probably shortly after the podcast is live, so we will be doing a non-spoiler/spoiler reaction, spoiler review of Severance Season 2 in next week's episode of the Access Blockbusters pod. But today we're just here to talk about the news that Severance Season 3 has been announced, has been greenlit. So Severance Season 3 is a go. But before we get into it, so I just wanted to say no spoilers will be here for Severance Season 2. And frankly, I can't talk about the finale because I don't know what happens in the finale. But we won't be spoiling anything in particular about Severance Season 2 besides the basic story arc. So if you don't want to know, then feel free to click away and come back once you've seen the show, because I would recommend seeing the show. It's a very interesting show. But we'll talk about Severance Season 1. The show it has such an original concept of basically going to work, and this procedure allows you to have an innie or an inside work personality and an outie or an out of work personality, and they're severed. They're different. So you basically, you go through this elevator, and once you go through the elevator at the office, you go down into the basement and you don't remember. Like, it's a completely different personality, and then you leave and it's the original outside personality. And so in that way, the inside personality is perpetually working, while the outside personality is just out of work, outside of work, and they don't know what goes on the inside of this company. And so Season 1 was really interesting. I will admit, Season 1 ended with a bit of a cliffhanger that left me a little bit unsatisfied. I thought it was interesting, but I don't love shows that just end on a big cliffhanger and say, wait till Season 2 to find out what goes on. And again, it's not a big spoiler for Season 2, it's just the general brushstrokes, the general flow and direction of Season 2. Season 2 is really taken its sweet time to talk about even that cliffhanger at the end of season 1. And so the fact that we're getting a season 3, which is, I don't think, a surprise to anyone, unless they were able to wrap up every single loose end at the end of season 2. And based on the first 9 episodes of season 2, it doesn't look like that was going to happen. And so naturally, you get a season 3. And so it looks like Severance is very content to keep the mystery going. Whether or not Severance season 3 is going to be the last season, as far as I have seen, has not been confirmed. But it is a full go. And they were talking, I believe Ben Stiller, who is the creator and one of the executive producers of the show, maybe he's the creator. I think he's the creator. At the very least, he's the executive producer of the show and director of many of the episodes. I think he said a while ago that, no, we're not guaranteed a season 3. But to be honest with you, Severance has been one of those shows that's been so in the cultural zeitgeist. It's been so permeating inside people's conversations. And I can speak from my own personal experience that it's interesting. Apple TV Plus, you don't talk about Apple TV Plus as a streaming service, but the shows that they produce are such week-to-week water cooler kind of shows. People were talking about Severance, Ted Lasso. I've been trying to get people to watch Shrinking for the longest time. So Severance has really, really seeped into the pop culture. And to not give it a season 3, especially if they don't resolve everything at the end of season 2, I think is crazy. It would be a no-brainer to greenlight it for a season 3. So it looks like Severance will be coming back for another season, and hopefully we'll get some more answers, because there are a lot of questions still floating up in the air that I suspect will not get resolved at the end of season 2. Again, just to be clear, I haven't seen the finale of season 2 as of the recording of this segment, but we will be checking it out and then talking about it in next week's episode of the Access Blockbusters pod. So guys, what do you think of the news? First of all, have you been watching Severance? What have you thought about it? Do you enjoy the show, or do you think it's a bit confusing? To be honest with you, I think both. I enjoy the show, but there are many moments within each episode that I go, I don't get what's going on. And part of that is part of the reason I suspect that we are getting a season 3 and 4, and 5, whatever, however long they want to go with the show, but definitely season 3 to wrap up some of these questions. So what do you guys think about Severance? Let me know in the comments. And also, what do you think about the news that they're getting a season 3? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, we here at the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, and by we, I mean I, but we here at the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel have a mantra. We have several mantras actually, and by now you might have heard several of the same things that I've been repeating for a while, because I really believe in them. And one of these things that I believe in terms of movie and television, is that we don't doubt Pixar. We are not in the business of doubting Pixar. Does that mean I love every single movie that Pixar's ever made? Certainly not. In fact, one of the first videos I ever made on this YouTube channel was a Pixar tier list. And it's been 5 years now. I should probably make a new one at this point. But, I don't love every single movie that Pixar has made. I don't love Brave. In fact, I kind of dislike Brave. I don't love some of the Cars films, right? I thought Lightyear was okay. So there are films in the Pixar canon that I don't love. That being said, most times, more often than not, when we doubt Pixar, we are proven wrong. And I say this, from my own personal opinion, but I think the general consensus seems to be the case. Let's take a few examples over the past few years. Toy Story 4. This was a movie that I said, why in the world are we making this? What is the point of this movie? I don't understand. This movie should not be made. We ended it with Toy Story 3. We're done. And look, there is an argument to be made. There still is an argument to be made that we shouldn't be making a Toy Story 5 and we shouldn't have made a Toy Story 4, because why? We ended it so well. What's the point? But then they made Toy Story 4, and for better or for worse, I really liked it. I really liked Toy Story 4. The other film, Elemental. I thought the trailers were kind of silly, goofy, childlike, and I watched Elemental. I loved it. I really liked Elemental. It was a great little movie. Coco was a film that I didn't see for a long time, not because I thought it looked dumb or anything like that, just because nothing stood out about it, in terms of the trailers and whatnot. And the only thing that brought me to the film was good word of mouth, and I watched Coco, and it is one of my favorite Pixar movies of all time. So we are not in the business of doubting Pixar. That being said, we're here to talk about trailers, or at least right now we're here to talk about trailers. And we're here to talk about, in particular, the second trailer that I've seen, maybe the third one, but the second big trailer that I've seen for Elio. Elio is the newest Pixar movie coming out. It's about a boy named Elio who wants to go to space and he gets abducted by aliens because that is his dream. And he goes and gets abducted by aliens, from the trailers at least, and we go off on our little adventure. And so this film is coming out this summer. It is the newest Pixar film. It is an original film, which I always love when Pixar makes original films, because the last time that Pixar made an original film, it was Elemental. Loved it. And, my favorite film of all time happens to be an original film from Pixar. That would be none other than Inside Out. And so, yeah, and if you make good original films, by the way, then you can spawn them into sequels and people will love them. Inside Out 2, for example, Incredibles 2, Toy Story 2 and 3. So, I love when Pixar makes these original films. That being said, like I've been saying, it's not like Pixar has been hitting on all cylinders lately. We've had films like Luca, and we've had films like Lightyear, for example, that weren't the most beloved. They were liked, but not beloved. And I personally was not a huge fan of Turning Red, but a lot of people love Turning Red. And Soul was interesting. It was a good film, but it was interesting. So I just don't know what to expect from Elio, right? And so I watched this trailer because from the first trailer, I just thought, yeah, it looks fine. It looks cute. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't love the trailer. I don't love the marketing campaign that's been going on so far with Elio. And I'm of two minds of this. Number one, this could be, the case where Pixar has made another film that is just kind of okay. And I think kind of okay as a floor is something that a lot of movie studios would want to have, right? Because to me, when I watch this trailer and I see even the animation style, but also the general story beats, right? This kid Elio who meets this monster, Glorbin? I don't even know. I don't remember what his name is, but they become friends, and then they're going to fight an intergalactic army and whatnot. To me, this seems like, going back to recent Pixar films, a mix between Luca and Lightyear, right? The space elements of Lightyear mixed with the kind of friendship, kind of just a loose and fun and floaty adventure, but not too weighty, right? Between friends. That's what this reminds me of. And I didn't dislike either of those films inherently. I thought that Lightyear had a really strong opening and then just kind of was okay for the rest of it. And I thought Luca was just fine, and it was enjoyable, and it was fine. And we moved on from there. So I, on the one hand, if that's the floor and if this is the movie that they're going to deliver and it's going to be more like Luca than anything else, okay, fine. I'm not going to get super excited about it. I'm going to watch it, of course, and I'm not going to be super, super thrilled and super, super excited about it. On the other hand, right? Like I said at the beginning, we're not in the business of doubting Pixar, and Pixar's trailers in general, I think, are generally targeted towards kids and young families, more so than anyone else. And that actually doesn't really line up with the fact that Pixar films are for everybody. I genuinely think when people say, oh, these family films are for everyone, I think Pixar films are legitimately for everyone. Like I said, Inside Out 2 in particular. I mean, you try explaining anxiety to a 5-year-old, right? The 5-year-old's going to enjoy all the bright colors and funny characters, but anxiety, right? That's an adult. That's a very human teenager kind of thing to deal with. So, on the one hand, Pixar trailers have never really gravitated. I've never gravitated towards them. I thought the Toy Story 4 trailers were terrible. Like I said, I thought that some of the Elemental trailers were not that great. Inside Out 2 didn't have great trailers. So I think, on the one hand, this doesn't look particularly appealing to me, just in terms of the scope and the jokes. Like, I think his alien friend, is cute, but the whole premise just seems a little silly and out there for me. But on the other hand, like I said, I'm not in the business of doubting Pixar. So, honestly, from this trailer, I can say that I didn't like it. I didn't love the trailer, but I'm still about as excited as I was before watching the trailer for Elio, and we'll see where we go from there. So guys, what did you think about the second trailer for Elio? Are you excited for the movie, or are you maybe a little bit nervous like I am? I'm a little bit of both, a little excited, a little nervous. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, Pixar has been on a little bit of an upswing. They had a little bit of a lull, I would say, during the pandemic. During the brunt of it, we had films like Luca and Lightyear, for example, coming out of 2020. But other films, such as, most people love Turning Red. I myself am not a huge fan of Turning Red, but I know a lot of other people did. Soul was really solid. And then you have films like Elemental and Inside Out 2. So they seem like they're heading back on track. And one thing I've talked about before is that I love this new pattern that they have going where they're doing alternating films, one original and one new, or one sequel, because I don't think sequels are inherently a bad thing, right? I mean, we just saw Inside Out 2 do really well. It's when studios over-rely on sequels and rely on nostalgia and IP, which, again, can work to a certain degree, but it's funny because we talk about sequels as if sequels are such a, dirty word, right, in terms of we want original content and whatnot. All the sequels, for the most part, because maybe they adapted from a book or reboots or whatnot, but usually sequels came from original IP, came from an original movie. Inside Out 2 is an example of that. It came from an original film that was one of my favorite, if not my favorite film of all time. And so, encouraging, of course, to make original IP can then lead to really good sequels. So, case in point, we have some news here that I think is really exciting, personally. And I think a lot of people will think it's exciting, but I think some people will say, well, what's the point of making a sequel to this movie? We have official news from Bob Iger himself, that Coco 2 is in development at Pixar. Now, before we get any further, it's important to point out this film is not going to come out until 2029. This film is a long, long way away, 4 years away. And Bob Iger says as much in his comments. This was during an annual shareholders conference, and he says, quote, "While the film is just in its initial stages, we know it will be full of humor, heart, and adventure, and we can't wait to share more soon." So this film is not even close to happening. It's probably just in pre-production, but still, it's an exciting thought to have a film like Coco 2 coming back. And I'm sure, right, that there are some more original films that are not being talked about, just because we wouldn't, if Bob Iger was like, hey, we're making a film called Headphones. I just saw Headphones on my desk, but Headphones, and it's coming out in 2028, and, we'll see you then. People wouldn't know what to do, right? People would just kind of brush it off. There are those bigger presentations like a D23 or whatnot that they'll talk about those kinds of things, like the movie about the beavers, Hoppers, right? That they're making. That's an original film. And so I'm sure that there are going to be more original films between now and 2029, because between now and 2029, you would be fooled to think, and it'd be understandable if you think that there are a ton of sequels and not much else, right? We have Toy Story 5 coming out, I believe, in 2 years. I could be wrong. Toy Story 5. We have Incredibles 3 coming out, and now we have Coco 2. And I would imagine that Inside Out 3 will happen sometime in the next 5 or 6 years, right? So lots of sequels coming out. But again, in between those, you have Elio. We just had Elemental. And we're going to get Hoppers as well, which Hoppers, the concept looks crazy, and I don't quite understand it, to be honest with you. It looks really weird and strange, but I would imagine that there are going to be a lot of original IP and original properties coming out, and I think that that's really exciting. So I'm enjoying the balance that Pixar is striking these days between original properties and sequels, because the sequels to the films that they're making, it's not like they're making Cars 4, for example, which they could make Cars 4 and it could be amazing, but, doesn't seem like anyone's clamoring for Cars 4, and I think that this is an exciting thing. I love Coco. I was a little bit late to it. I saw it a couple years after it came out, and it's one of my favorite Pixar movies of all time. I did one of my first videos on the channel is a Pixar tier list, and Coco is probably up there. I don't know if it's A tier or S tier, probably S tier, and I still believe that to this day. It's just one of my favorite films of all time, favorite Pixar films of all time. So guys, what do you think about the news that Coco 2 has been officially announced? Are you excited about it, or maybe you're not super interested, but hopefully we can all get excited about it as it comes out? Let me know in the comments down below. All right, guys, we haven't had a chance to talk about the Percy Jackson series in quite a while, but it was one of the series that surprised me, honestly, the most in the past few years. I'm not going to lie. I didn't have high expectations for the series. I think from the trailers, it seemed like it was leaning too much on the kids, and I'm not saying this to disparage children, child actors, because what more can we expect from them? Honestly, it's a crazy feat once child actors, we discover child actors who actually are that talented. I always think about Stranger Things, for example. It's crazy. It's really crazy because these are 10, 12-year-old kids, right? So, yeah, I saw the trailer. I know Walker Scobell, who plays Percy Jackson. He was a very talented actor even before Percy Jackson, but the other actors I wasn't as familiar with, and the Disney Plus reboot just seemed very Disney Plus, for lack of a better term. It seemed very sanitized, not in the way of, I wanted Percy Jackson to have gore and all that kind of stuff. No, just sanitized in the sense of it felt very clean looking in the aesthetic, right? And I think that just kind of made me go, yeah, I don't know if I'm a huge fan of it. I watched it. It's been a couple of years now, maybe a year and a half or so since the first season came out, and I can't believe how much I enjoyed the first season. It was, as somebody who read the books, who really enjoyed the books, and watched the other movies and really didn't enjoy the other movies. Yeah, not the fault of Logan Lerman and the rest of the cast, but just really didn't enjoy the adaptation. I was looking for a good Percy Jackson adaptation. I think we got it, at least in my opinion, in the past season. So we've been waiting for season 2. We got the announcement of a season 2, The Sea of Monsters, of course, and that is coming out in just a few months, actually, in December of 2025, something that I didn't know until I read this article, because this Variety article is actually pointing to the fact that season 3 already has a green light, which is crazy. So let's take a look at this Variety article. Let's read a little bit of it here, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. So this article starts out, quote, Percy Jackson and the Olympians has been renewed for season 3 at Disney Plus nearly a year before the show's second season premiere. Okay, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. Yes, it's coming out in December, but not quite a year. But anyways, a little bit under a year. Let's keep going. Disney branded television and 20th century or 20th century television has announced that the third season based on the Rick Riordan novel The Titan's Curse is already in the works, with season 2 of the hit series now set to debut in December 2025. An exact premiere date will be announced in the future. So First of all, the tidbit there that I didn't know is that season 2 is coming out December 2025, which, yes, is a long ways away. I mean, by that point, we'll be getting an Avatar film, which is a crazy thing to think about. So, and we'll have already gotten Wicked Part 2. So it's a long ways away. But it's still close enough to make you excited about it. At least make me excited about it, right? Because sure, a lot will happen between now and December 2025 in terms of movies and television. But I think it's a very exciting thing. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that the third season has already been greenlit, which is actually a really good sign in two specific ways. Number one, it shows that they have such confidence in the second season, because you just don't do this, right? I mean, if they had done this before the first season, you might be saying, well, okay, so then they're just kind of flying blind, and it could work, right? They did that with Lord of the Rings. They said, we're gonna make all three of these films at once, and it's gonna work, or it's just really not gonna work. And it really worked, right? But if you do it before even the first movie or the first season releases, then you don't know. I mean, it really could fall on its face, right? So it's a risk. If you do it, though, after the first movie or season has been released, and then you kind of say, okay, before season 2 even comes out, we're greenlighting season 3, I think it really shows confidence in the property. And it's not just a rash, risk that they're taking. It's, hey, we've seen how well season 1 did, and numbers-wise, it did pretty well, and critically, it did pretty well. And they look at season 2 and they go, this is going to work. And so they're greenlighting season 3. So in that way, it makes me even more excited for season 2, because it shows that they have confidence in it, which is great. The other thing, right, I mentioned two things, two very tangible takeaways here. The other thing is that we're going to get it sooner. And the more that we can return to quality television making, in a sense where we're getting still really high caliber television series and seasons, but it happens faster. So again, not sacrificing quality for quantity, but TV shows used to come out every year. A season of television would come out every year. It wasn't just sitcoms either. Really, quote unquote high level television, because again, I love sitcoms, but you know what I mean, like the 45-minute length episodes. Those seasons of television used to come out basically every single year. And the faster that we can get back to that, I think the better. If we can because also these kids are not getting any younger, right? So yeah, it's fine and all to have maybe Walker Scobell playing Percy Jackson, who's 15 and he's 18. Like, that's fine. But at some point it's going to get ridiculous if he's 30 and he's playing a 20-year-old, right? I mean, maybe not, right? Some actors can pull it off better than others. So I think, but these kids aren't getting any younger. So if we can get a season of Percy Jackson every single year, basically, that's awesome. I think that would be great, right? That's what the Harry Potter series is aiming to go for. And that's a case where, I mean, unless the first season just bombs, they're going to go for it, right? They're doing the Lord of the Rings. They're just going to keep making them, as far as we know. So I think this is great news. And I'm very excited to see where this series goes. Guys, what do you think of the announcement that Percy Jackson has been renewed for a season 3 already? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. So we've been talking a lot in past months, past years about Disney live action remakes, because, well, live action remakes have just been a topic of conversation for quite a bit now. We've got the How to Train Your Dragon one coming out, and that one has just conflicted me so much, because I feel like I should be opposed to these things, especially the ones that are just remaking their films shot for shot, basically, just like The Lion King did. And, you have films like The Jungle Book or Cinderella that kind of adapted the animated film to live action, which is great. I love those. I loved Aladdin, and Aladdin was more faithful to the source material, but it still did some adaptation. I think it was great. Then you have, Little Mermaid, which is fine. So I've been very on the fence with these live action remakes, especially from Disney. They've been very hit or miss for me. And so when they announced Snow White, right, because Aladdin, for example, wasn't an animated film from Disney that I was particularly excited to see brought to live action, but it was the execution, right? So when they announced they were going to do Snow White, I was like, well, out of the Disney canon, the animated Disney canon, this was probably one of the last films that I would have wanted to see brought to life, just because I just don't have an attachment to this film. I don't think it's particularly interesting as an adult, so I wasn't too sure about this one. But I said, let's bring on good talent. Rachel Zegler is phenomenally talented, and Gal Gadot, we'll see. She was really good as Diana Prince, as Wonder Woman, but Evil Queen, okay, we'll see about that. And then we kind of went on from there. So then eventually we got those first trailers. And the first trailers were interesting, and they ended, I believe, with a shot of the Seven Dwarfs, who, in my opinion, because some people, and I'm not going to say anyone's right or wrong, it's just personal taste, but some people were like, oh, interesting, I like the CGI design of the dwarves. I think they look horrific. I think they look terrifying, something out of a video game half-rendered nightmare. That's just my personal opinion. And the second trailer that's been playing in front of movies in past months has not assuaged my fears. I think they still look crazy and they still look terrifying to me. And I think it's weird. I really think it's weird. I don't know. Again, I don't know how you could have done it in 2025 in terms of just making it not strange, but it was just weird. It was just strange. I mean, I think back to The Hobbit, right? And they were able to make those dwarves look so real and so, I don't know. Maybe you could have done something like that. Anyways. So I've been watching the trailers and I just haven't been convinced. Also, the other thing about it is Gal Gadot has not looked convincing at all as the queen to me. She just doesn't look intimidating. It looks like Gal Gadot is, Diana Prince, it's just wearing a costume and pretending to be evil. And I'm not entirely convinced about it. That being said, I've always said this. I go into every movie and every show with an open mind because what's the worst that can happen? I can end up liking it. And that's the best case scenario. So I've been waiting for reactions for the first Snow White, for the first reactions and first reviews. Now, I was actually going to do a segment after the first initial reactions coming out of the theater, the social media reactions, because I was like, oh, wow, interesting. There was some interesting comments there. But then I thought, well, the reviews are going to come out in a couple of days. So let's just wait until the reviews come out and let's do a segment about this. By the time you're watching this segment, the movie will have already come out probably. And so you might have been able to see it for yourself. I will try to watch it for next week's episode or even the week after. So we'll eventually get to it. But I will probably not be able to. In fact, I definitely won't be able to watch it in time for this episode, which is why we're talking about the reviews and reactions. So anyways, I thought it was interesting because the first reactions were generally pretty positive. I've gotten into a mindset, though, of not really trusting these first reactions because they're generally skewed pretty positive, and the reviews will actually come out and they'll be like, okay, not as good as I thought. So I wanted to see, is that the case? Because there was a realm in which these reactions bore out a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty good. And again, Rotten Tomatoes is not the be-all, end-all of review systems, but it's just a helpful metric for me. So then I waited for the reviews, and we're going to read through, on Rotten Tomatoes, they have a list of the critics and a list of the reviews, and they have the little blurbs with the rotten or fresh sign. And I wanted to read out some of these blurbs. We're going to read them for the first time. But just to preface this, right? Just to preface this entire conversation, Snow White currently, as I'm recording this, has a 48%, and that's going to go up and it's going to go down, but it's going to probably stay within the 40 to 60 range. And that's about where I thought it was going to be before the reactions came out. Maybe even a little lower. So honestly, I'm not too terribly shocked about any of this. In fact, I think Little Mermaid, for comparison, had something like a 55%. So, and I liked Little Mermaid. I didn't love it, but I liked it. So I think it's interesting. I think that this film is going to have a whole range of reactions as that number suggests. So we're just going to go through. I'm just going to start out from the top, and we're going to try to read the top critics ones. Not because I'm biased towards top critics or anything like that, but just because, otherwise I'm going to be here for 3 hours reading every single little blurb. So this first one here is going from the top here. It says, quote, "I had high hopes that Snow White would make me happy. Instead, this dopey remake made me sleepy and grumpy." Some of these critics really like their puns, I've been noticing. So yeah, that's one. And that was a rotten review. Just to be clear, let's find another top critic. Here is another top critic's little blurb here. Quote, "The most distracting flaws are rooted in the problematic recreation of the animated material." Okay, interesting. And I haven't read any of these before. I mentioned this earlier, but I haven't read any of these before, so we're reading them together for the first time. "The permanent magic hour lighting is hard to look at. Worst of all, the decision to cartoonize the dwarves alongside human actors is hugely problematic." Okay, so there's somebody who, this is obviously a rotten review, for those of you who couldn't tell. This is somebody who just thought the dwarves didn't really work. The design of the dwarves didn't really work. So let's go on to another top critic here. Quote, "A fascinating case study in today's impossible contradictions, a magic mirror reflecting the tensions of the current times." That seems like it generally is positive, but it actually skews negative. Let's read another one. This is, top critic here. "Some parts of the film work better than others, but none of it has the sweetness and imagination of the animated feature. This Snow White is not the fairest of them all. It's just fair." That one's rotten. So interestingly, the top critics seem to be skewing towards the negative, but I found one here that's positive. So, and this one's pretty positive actually. Quote, "A visually stunning, thematically rich adaptation that successfully modernizes the classic tale. This is a fairy tale for a new generation, one that reminds us all of the power of courage, kindness, and believing in a better future." Interesting. I'm gonna Well, I'll load a couple more here. Let's take a look and see if anything else jumps out. But yeah, this is from Variety. This is a fresh review. And the quote is, quote, "The chirpy, vivacious, just romantic enough to get by Snow White proves to be an exception to the rule." So this person doesn't seem like they enjoy the Disney live action remakes too much, but they enjoyed Snow White here. Going through really quickly, a lot of these are more on the negative side from the top critics. I'll read this one's from the San Francisco Chronicle, a top critic, and they really liked the film. At least they gave it a fresh, and it says, quote, "Efficiently directed by Mark Webb with an excellent production design by Cave Quinn, I think. Snow White is everything you need it to be and nothing more." So that one is more middle of the road, but they decided to give it a fresh rating. So again, 48% means half the critics like it and half the critics don't. This is honestly about where I would have thought in terms of probability. Like if you had said, okay, give me 100 different scenarios for Snow White in terms of likelihood, I would have probably, the majority of them would have said it's going to hover around the 50%. The first reactions are always interesting because they were very positive for the film. And a lot of people were like, yeah, this is really good. This is really fun. And so I just find this interesting. We'll have to see. But I think, a win for Disney, and the box office projections don't look too great for Snow White, but a win for Disney really would look like, well, critics are fine with it, find a good with it, and audiences seem to like it, and then they make some money, and they hopefully try to break even, and they move on from it. I think at this point, that's probably the best case scenario for this, right? Or the Rotten Tomato score hovers, above 50% at a certain point. The audience score is 70 to 80%, and the box office, I don't know what the production was, but I have to imagine it's not low. So the box office reaches about 400 million, because again, Little Mermaid quietly made a lot of money. Little Mermaid made $550 million. So that's probably the best case scenario for Disney. But guys, those are the first reviews and reactions to Snow White. Are you surprised by any of this, or does this kind of track with your expectations? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, another week, another episode of Daredevil Born Again. So, we are going to be talking about episode number 4 of the new MCU television show Daredevil Born Again. If you have not seen episode 4, no worries. Just make sure to come back to the channel once you have. Save this video, save this segment, save this podcast for later. And if you don't care about spoilers, then welcome. But otherwise, this is going to be a spoiler discussion for all things episode 4 Daredevil Born Again. And of course, the previous 3 episodes as well. So let's get into it, guys. So, just to recap some of my thoughts, as I always like to do at the beginning of these spoiler discussions, of course, I was really excited for Daredevil Born Again. Like I've been saying as well, I've been trying to rewatch the entire series before the ending of Daredevil Born Again Season 1, just so that I can go straight into a rewatch of Daredevil Born Again and see how it fits in holistically with Seasons 1 through 3. I've been really enjoying my rewatch of Daredevil Season 1 so far, and I'm actually almost done. I'm literally almost done. So close to being done. So that's an exciting thing. But yeah, I mean, the first season of Daredevil has just been amazing. It's been awesome. And going into Daredevil Born Again, I was excited. We heard about the retooling and everything like that. So I was just excited and interested to see how they would approach these characters. And the trailer was just brutal. The trailer was so in line with the first few seasons of Daredevil Born Again. So episode 1, I thought was a great start. I thought it returned to that kind of brutality. It returned to that, it really started off with this lingering cloud of Foggy's death, right? And it's just a really heavy thing to start off with, but you understand Daredevil Born Again, right? But then episodes 2 and 3, they were interesting because I think that they were setting up a lot of things. And some storylines I was more on board with than others, right? And we'll talk about how those continue on in episode 4. But, I think some parts of those episodes I was like, okay, I'm really, really interested in this. Episode 2, I think, wrapped itself up really nicely. And it's interesting, right? Because the experience with those 2 episodes 2 and 3, I had a very similar experience where the first maybe 50 to 60, 70% of the episode, I was like, I'm enjoying it, but I'm not super sold on it. I'm a little bit on the fence. And then the last little chunk of those episodes really bring them home. Really bring those episodes together. Like the whole thing in the last episode about vigilantes and about White Tiger, being released from the trial. And then, of course, he's killed. And so it leads to this whole, Punisher arc that we'll talk about in just a second. And obviously Punisher will be back in some capacity. This is not the last we've seen of Frank Castle, just based on set photos and trailers and things like that. But anyway, so that's really been my experience with the last couple episodes. I don't dislike or maybe I dislike a couple of the subplots, but, I don't hate anything in particular. I just think that the show isn't quite firing on all cylinders, although I think that the overarching storylines I'm on board with still. The idea of vigilantism, the idea of Wilson Fisk, and Matt Murdock starting to let their true inner selves of Kingpin and Daredevil bleed through and show, and eventually they'll get there. It's just been a slow build. It's been, born again, right? I think it's been a struggle for the characters, to get back to figuring out who they really are. Is Kingpin really just the government bureaucrat, and is Matt Murdock the clean lawyer, right? Who does everything by the book? And obviously we know that these two characters have a very checkered past, and so we'll see how that goes. So let's get into episode 4. And I took notes as always, and we'll talk about my notes, and we'll talk about the episode, and then we'll get into my overall thoughts at the very, very end here. So, starting off with here, we get the scene with White Tiger's niece, and I think I would have immediately just wanted to say I would have liked to have seen the niece before. I don't think we got a scene with her, but I think it would have been nice to see the niece before this episode, because it would have made the beginning way more impactful. As it was a pretty impactful scene. It was a pretty sad scene to see the niece talk about just how unfair everything was, and I agree. Like it's showcasing how unfair the system is. The system is corrupt, and I think that's what ultimately we're driving towards, is the fact that both people, right, Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock, are realizing the system is not going to work for them, and so they have to return in some capacity to being vigilantes and being the Kingpin that we know. And so we'll see how that plays off of that as well. But then we get we get that scene with the niece, and then we get some more shots of the murals. And speaking of the murals, I was thinking at that moment, where is Muse? And sure enough, we get a scene with Muse carrying a body, and we don't get to see Muse again until the end of the episode. So we'll see where Muse is showing up. I think one of the things that's been interesting about this show thus far is that some of the scenes feel a little disconnected with one another. So we get a scene with Muse here and there, and then we get a scene with Punisher here and there. We get a scene with Michael Gandolfini here and there, and it's just kind of bouncing off here and there. And so I'm just wondering when these storylines are going to start connecting to one another in a way that feels more comprehensive, feels more cohesive, right? Things are leading, one thing leads to another. Right now they feel very segmented, and I'm hoping that as we head into the latter half of the season, because next week is the midpoint of the season, episode 5, and I believe episode 6 as well next week. So we'll see where we go from there, but I'm hoping that that we see what goes on. We get a better sense of where this whole season is going to end up. After the opening credits, we get more Michael Gandolfini and Gandolfini? I can never pronounce it. Gandolfini, I think. And BB Urich. I don't love these two characters. This is one of the subplots that's not working for me super well. Daniel Blake and BB Urich. I don't love the whole Gen Z. I'm the Gen Z, you're super eager to please, I'm going to suck up to Kingpin and I'm going to do everything he says, and please forgive me, Kingpin, don't fire me. It's not working for me. I don't know. It's really not working for me super well as a character. I know that, I'm sure that this character has more to him than just being that, really eager kid. And I'm curious to figure out where this is all going, but I just don't have a good grasp on that. And right now I'm not buying the performance super well. We return to couples counseling, another subplot that I am also just not super on board with right now. Although I got pretty excited, and I mean, I suppose that the Adam character ended up also being an interesting place. But my first guess when they started talking about Adam again in this couples counseling scene was that he was Muse. And he could be Muse in a sense. I don't know how, because right after the scene at the very end of the episode with Adam, we do see Muse again. So I don't think that Adam is Muse, but I thought at first, because I thought, oh, what a really interesting connection, because of one thing Vanessa Fisk says to Wilson Fisk, where she says he painted with such beautiful sketches, his hands, right? He painted. And he did such beautiful sketches, and I was like, okay, maybe there's that connection there. Maybe we're building up towards it, which is really, really interesting. And then it turns out that, Wilson Fisk is doing something terrifying with Adam, and I will get to that. But I guess he isn't Muse, so I don't know. But I thought that was an interesting idea, and it would have been an interesting thing to play out. We'll see where that goes from there. I think, though, my thing with this storyline of couples counseling is that it's uncomfortable, right? And it's, it's supposed to be, right? It's a two people trying to work through their marital problems. It's uncomfortable, but it's not tense. I don't feel tense. I don't feel scared. I feel like I'm watching two people go through something that's very uncomfortable for them and very uncomfortable for me as an audience member, but not something that I'm in, I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm like, oh, this is really, I'm getting really into, I'm just watching them, just watching them go through this scene. I think that's one problem that I have with this scene. I do wonder if we're setting up the idea of Wilson Fisk, having to let go of Vanessa at the end of the season, because he reiterates here in this episode, oh, I can't live without Vanessa, and I'm really trying to make it work. And Vanessa, you really hurt me. But I'm wondering if we get to the place at the end of the season where he finally is like, nope, I have to let you go. Whether he kills her, maybe that would be crazy. Or maybe he's somehow they get divorced or something. I don't know. But maybe he finally leaves her behind and he's going to be a changed Kingpin. We'll see. So then we enter with Matt Murdock into this Leroy Bradford situation storyline where he is in jail for stealing some popcorn. And look, I mean, this is a complicated storyline, right? Because he gives a little monologue later on where he talks about the fact that it's not fair. The system isn't fair. And, Matt's like, hey, I got you 10 days in prison or 10 days on probation. No, 10 days in prison. And he's like, no, I mean, 10 days, even 10 days being in prison, I can't get food stamps. And, I just wanted the popcorn. I just wanted one good thing in life and they got me for it. So again, it's a complicated character. It's a complicated reflection of society in terms of some of the bad things that the systems and institutions and things like that have in place. And so I totally get that. It's interesting though at the very beginning how I'm not gonna say rude. I'm just gonna say how much he really ragged on Matt at the beginning, because I was like, whoa, okay. So but you kind of get it, right? You get it because again he talks about the fact that just things are broken. And again I understand what the show is going for. I think it's starting to really not drag, but I'm starting to want to get to a point where, okay, Matt, like let's you saw all the masks at the end of the episode. Let's maybe get to that point where we're getting back into the action. I think episode 5 probably will be that point. Again, the original report said that Daredevil was not in costume until episode 4 of the original series, and I can understand that if the past 3 episodes, 2, 3, and 4, are mostly similar to what the original series was going to be. I can understand how, right? You're starting out with just a legal procedural, and I get it. How people are going to be like, if we didn't have this new episode 1, that people would have been like, wait a second, where is he? Where's Daredevil? I don't get it. So, I can understand that, because I'm getting to the point now. Not, I'm not at the point where I need Daredevil to come back. I need somebody to start punching somebody. Like nothing like that. I just think that it's. This is Daredevil born again. And I think we're getting to the point where we need Matt to be born again as Daredevil. So we'll see. And look, I'm good with this version of Matt, a little bit more happy-go-lucky lawyer, right? Not happy-go-lucky, but just sort of, doing his lawyer thing. I think that what made Matt such an interesting character, though, is that he's so tortured and he has so many things going on, inner demons, if you will, pun intended, right? And so, I think that the thing about this season is that you started off with something so haunting, and episode 1 portrayed it so well, where he was so broken by Foggy's death. And I think we needed more of this. We get a scene like this later, and so I wrote this before we got that scene with Frank, and I love that scene with Frank. We'll talk about that in just a second. I think we need more of that. And I think we need Foggy's death to really underline this whole season, because it seems like in other scenes, other than the Frank scene, and maybe that scene where he's cooking with Heather in a couple episodes ago, we just don't get anything about Foggy. And I think that is an interesting thing. So we'll see where that goes from here. He also is threatening Officer Powell again, or not threatening, but he, they're having that back and forth. And so that's another interesting angle to play as well. We get some more scenes about Kingpin in bureaucracy and about how much he hates red tape. Again, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing to see Kingpin as mayor. I think we're all waiting for the reins to be let off a little bit so that Kingpin can really just, be Kingpin, right? He is playing, the criminal bosses as well. I think there's a quick scene in there where they talk about it, but I think we're all kind of waiting for Kingpin to get back to Kingpin. So let's see where that goes. Leroy, like I mentioned before, he has that monologue about the system, and I think, again, very understandable. He's a complicated character, and I think what the point of that is that it's showing Matt, okay, so even though I think we got a small victory out of this, that it's not necessarily a small victory for the people who are being affected. So there's that. Then we get to a scene with Fisk where he's listening to children singing "We Built the City," and then he's listening to Latvians sing "We Built the City." And I think it is fun. I did laugh out loud when he was like, no, that's fine. I'm done. That's enough. I think the thing about these scenes is that they kind of signify one of the things I'm just monitoring, because we've seen in the trailers, right? Kingpin does beat up some people. And again, I'm not one of these people who just likes violence for the sake of violence in media. I think that honestly, violence in general is really over the top in media, in movies and television shows. But I think, again, having seen Daredevil season 1, Kingpin doesn't beat up people a whole lot, but when he does, he is terrifying in the original series. And this Kingpin just isn't scary. He's annoyed, right? Like, he's just an annoyed Kingpin. When Kingpin yells, "I want an all-hands meeting now," doesn't ring as true as "we're gonna go after the man in the mask," in season 1. So I'm waiting for Kingpin again. Just let the reins off and let's just see Kingpin and Daredevil back. I think we've built it up enough now where we can start to build up towards that, and whatever's going on with Muse, but we'll see. I think that this Kingpin is annoyed, and I'd like to see a Kingpin that is terrifying rather than just annoyed. So then he also just yells at Daniel, and I don't know what Daniel's angle is here. Kingpin is threatening Daniel. He says that's the last thing if you do this again, if you leak the news again, that's the last thing you'll ever do. So getting back to the old Kingpin a little bit, but we'll see how that character evolves through the rest of the season. Finally, though, we get to the scene with Frank, and he is not in a good place. He is really not in a good place. The Punisher, Daredevil, I love how he calls him Red. Again, the dynamic is back between these two characters. And I wrote in my notes, there it is, right? Because this is the scene where the death of Foggy comes back into full focus. And this is where I think we don't need Matt to just be depressed the entire time, right? Matt can, of course, be moving on, pursuing other interests and being a lawyer and having, falling in love and things like that. That's all great. But this needs to be underlying, whether subconsciously or underneath all of it subtly, the death of Foggy needs to be there, right? And this scene brought it out. This is the best scene in the entire show for me so far. I'm just talking about Daredevil Born Again. This conversation with Frank, where especially he's comparing the death of his son to Foggy's death. That comparison of grief is so powerful. It's so powerful for those of us who have seen season two of Daredevil. And Matt saying it's not about him, and Frank looking at him and saying it's all about him. Like that. This scene is so good, and that's what I was saying. So earlier, I said episodes 2 and 3, I had the experience of the first maybe 50, 60, 70% of the episode I was just not as on board with. But then the last, little chunk of each episode, the last 10, 15, 20 minutes of episodes 2 and 3 kind of brought everything home. Episode 2 with the scene where he is confronted by the cops, right? Episode 3 with the White Tiger situation. It brings it all home. And this episode does it as well with this scene with Punisher, with Frank, and also the scene later on with Muse, and of course the scene with Adam. I think that the ending of these episodes are pulling these episodes together. It's completely making me keep my interest, right? And I'm not off board of the show by any means, but I think that it's really these scenes that give me hope that these episodes are leading towards something bigger and better in terms of the character arcs for Matt and Wilson and Frank even. And we'll see where Frank comes back. I'm sure he'll be back, maybe even next episode. We'll see about that. Anyways, Matt Murdock, so he returns to his apartment. Guys, remember when he had that really dingy apartment next to the billboard, and now he's up here living the life. He's hanging out with Heather. I guess they're sleeping over at each other's apartment. Poor Jen is what I think about every single time. I'd be really curious. Somebody pull out a timeline of Daredevil and his exploits, not just romantically, but just in general. And where does She-Hulk fit into that at all? Where does Echo fit into that at all? I have no idea. If somebody can make a timeline, I'd like to see it. So, anyways, yeah. And then Matt, he can't sleep, so he goes up and he opens his warehouse and he has all the masks. And so I think we're getting back to that point. I think I would say next episode. I hope it's not at the very end of the episode and it's just, cliffhanger, the end. I hope that it's a little bit more than just that, but I think we'll see him in full costume again in next episode. And we'll see what version of Matt Murdock, because I think what we stand to gain from all this buildup is that this version of Matt Murdock, or this version of Daredevil that's going to show up again, is going to be a little bit unhinged. And I think it'll take him through the end of the season, maybe even into next season, to kind of find that balance again of him being a vigilante, but also him, being about justice and retribution and kind of that balance between the two. And so we'll see what happens there, right? And then the final scenes, we'll talk about the Muse one first. I mean, again, Muse is terrifying. I mean, the murals and the paintings and everything, and him taking the blood, it's all terrifying. It's crazy. And so if they ever decide to focus on Muse, which I hope they'll do soon, and I'm assuming Muse is the real villain of the show, going to be terrifying. So there's that. But again, going back to Fisk, right? One of the things that gives me hope is that, for the most part, Fisk is just annoyed. and he's not scary anymore, in my opinion. But then there's this last scene where he's just eating dinner, and he has imprisoned Adam, and Adam is just screaming and asking to be freed. And that is the old Kingpin, right? That is, I'm not saying that all the characters have to be the exact same as they were in the original series, not at all. I'm just saying that there are core things about these characters that made them so interesting, and this is one of those things with Kingpin, that he's so ruthless, and there is this inner monster inside both these characters, Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk, and I think that that's an interesting thing that I'm curious to see where we'll go from here. So, look, at the end of the day, I'm not disappointed necessarily by these first 4 episodes. I think I see a lot of potential, and I see a lot of room for growth, and I think that it's going to be hard to say how I feel about these episodes until we see where these storylines end up, right? The couples counseling in particular, I think, could be something interesting, but I don't think it is so far. Frankly, the Daniel Blake storyline is just super uninteresting to me. The BB Urich storyline is uninteresting to me, but depending on where they end up, they might be a little bit more important than I gave them credit for. And I think other things like, the things with Frank and the thing with Adam at the end, they all give me hope that this show is building towards something that I think will be quite compelling towards the end. So what did you guys think of episode 4 of Daredevil Born Again? Did you enjoy it? Are you enjoying the series thus far? We're 4 episodes in, and I think next week we'll be hitting the halfway point. Let me know what you thought about episode 4 in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, if you have seen the Daredevil Born Again trailer, not even any episode in particular, just if you have seen the Daredevil Born Again trailer, this segment will contain 0 spoilers for Daredevil Born Again. If you haven't seen the trailer though, I suppose this is a massive spoiler, but the title and the thumbnail should have probably given away what we're going to talk about. So again, I'm not going to spoil anything in this segment in particular that has been in the episodes themselves, just going to talk about what we know from the trailer. So if you don't want to know about that, but you clicked on this video somehow, then I guess it's, time to click away. But anyways, let's get into this. So Punisher is going to make his return in Daredevil Born Again. And Punisher, right, a character that debuted in Daredevil Season 2, he gained such a following in terms of people, really liking him, not liking necessarily what he did, but just, being a compelling character, that he spawned 2 separate seasons of Netflix television after or during Daredevil, with characters like Karen Page showing up in those seasons as well. And Ben Barnes, was it, who played Jigsaw? I think that was, Ben Barnes, super underrated actor. Anyways. So Punisher, and when Daredevil Born Again was announced, people were wondering, okay, so if Charlie Cox, Vincent D'Onofrio, who else could we bring back? Could it be Jon Bernthal? And the initial indications didn't really seem to say as much, right? People were, when they were originally shooting the show, it didn't seem like that Punisher had a big presence in the show, if at all. And so there were rumors that Jon Bernthal would be coming back, but nobody really knew. Then there were reports that Jon Bernthal had signed on, and momentarily after that, it was revealed that Daredevil Born Again was kind of being retooled and not scrapped, but reworked. And now we have a little bit more insight into what all the behind the scenes of that process was, or at least the decision, the reasoning that Jon Bernthal gives about returning to Daredevil Born Again, and also some insights into the previously discussed Punisher special presentation that's going to come out next year. That is going to be written, I believe, and produced by Jon Bernthal himself as Punisher. So let's first talk about Jon Bernthal's quotes about returning to Daredevil Born Again. So in this first quote, he's talking about what, the original version before they retooled and reworked the scripts and the production for Daredevil Born Again. He's talking about that. So he says, quote, "Ultimately, I didn't see it. I didn't see this version of Frank, and what they wanted from Frank didn't really make sense to me, and I thought it wouldn't appeal to the fans and wouldn't be congruent. It was not something I was really interested in doing, so we had to walk away." Then he talks about the process of being brought back, and he says, quote, "They really brought me into that conversation. We really got specific about where Frank is psychologically, where Frank is physically." Okay, so first of all, before we even get to the quotes about Punisher's special presentation, this, to me, shows how not on board these actors were in the original version, right? And it seems like they did keep a decent chunk of that original version in here. I think a lot of the legal procedural stuff was worked around for sure, right? With Hector Ayala, and I would suspect that fight scene at the end of episode 2 was part of the new version. But I think that a lot of it was reworked. But I think that some of the original show was kept. But it's interesting because whatever they did, if it was part of the original version of the show, or if it's part of the new version, they were able to seamlessly weave things in to where to where things feel like they're all one congruent story, right? But it's interesting that I guess in the original version, they really did want to have Punisher show up, and Jon Bernthal was like, no, I'm not doing it because this version of Frank isn't what I want. And it's interesting because Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, who play Daredevil and Kingpin, were also recently quoted as saying, well, we were nervous about the version of the show that they were making. But they said, and I'm not saying that Jon Bernthal isn't a team player. He would have been a guest actor. So it's his choice, right? He's not leading the show. The show doesn't crumble with or without Punisher. Although it's great to see Punisher again, as we saw in the trailers. But Vincent D'Onofrio and Charlie Cox were like, yeah, we were nervous about it, but we were team players, so we were going to make the best out of that situation. Jon Bernthal, I get it that it's on a different level. He's like, well, if they want me to just come in for a few episodes, but I'm going to be this character that I don't really recognize, then why would I do it? So I think that really goes to show how much they actually did retool, because some people were wondering, and I was wondering, was it just the first episode that they kind of retooled? And that's not a spoiler for the first episode. Just it's kind of obvious what one of the significant changes was from the first episode. But it's interesting, right? I think that this is all interesting. But then he goes on, so this is all bouncing off of that, to talk about his involvement with the special presentation that's coming out next year. He says, quote, "The story that we've laid out is, I think, really special. It's the visceral, psychologically complex, unforgiving, no-holds-barred version of Frank, where he's going to turn his back to the audience. And nothing is easy, and all violence has a cost. And we're going to see that cost. I'm grateful that they're letting me go to the places that I really want to go." This, to me, shows that we're getting back on track with whatever, version of Daredevil was happening before and whatever is happening now. I think that this is clearly back on track. Again, I haven't been, how do I put this? I'm liking Daredevil Born Again. I am. I'm not in love with the show as I was with the first couple seasons and with the first, iteration of Daredevil on Netflix, but I'm really liking it. And I think I'm really liking more so the direction that they're heading, right? More so than some of the things in the episodes right now. And to me, this shows they know exactly, the people who are behind it, including Jon Bernthal, including Charlie Cox, know what they have to do, because the thing about Punisher, right, is it's not just violence for the sake of violence. It shouldn't be. Punisher is saying, Jon Bernthal is saying, this violence in this special presentation has a cost, and we're going to really play out that cost. What does it mean for Frank to commit all this violence? So I think it's interesting. And I'm very curious. I am very curious to see what this special presentation turns into, because again, it's an opportunity to tell a story in a very succinct amount of time, and we'll see where we go from there. Guys, what do you think about these comments from Jon Bernthal about his return as Punisher and also the Punisher special presentation? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, I feel like I've talked about Sergeant Rock on this YouTube channel more than I ever would have thought I would have talked about Sergeant Rock in my life. Because if you had asked me a couple months ago, how many times in the next 3 months would you talk about Sergeant Rock? I wouldn't have even known who Sergeant Rock was without looking him up. And I would have said, once? Maybe? I would have assumed this was some kind of movie that was being announced by a pretty famous director, and it had a good cast, and it was like, oh yeah, this movie is getting announced by Steven Spielberg is directing Sergeant Rock. I wouldn't have known. So then the news started to come out that Sergeant Rock was a DC property, and I did some more research, and I was like, okay, so this is sort of a World War II sort of deal, and we got hints of this. If you had asked me before Creature Commandos, I wouldn't have had much idea, but after having seen Creature Commandos and Sergeant Rock made his first quote-unquote canonical appearance in the DCU, I was like, okay, so I kind of get his deal. It's not quite Captain America's Howling Commandos, but it's a similar thing, but it's, a little darker, and I think with G.I. Robot and all that, it's an interesting concept for sure. So then it was announced that DC was going to be making a DCU movie with Sergeant Rock, and it was going to be, they were in talks to get a very famous actor, one Mr. Daniel Craig, and it was said that he was going to sign on for the film, or at least he was pretty close to signing on for the film. So a couple months go by, and we don't really hear anything. And then we get this news a few weeks ago that Daniel Craig is actually dropped out of the role of Sergeant Rock. And it was actually announced, or it was revealed in that article by that outlet, that he had actually never really signed on to the role. And he had never been, I think they had given him an offer was what these sources were claiming, but he had never really signed on to it in the first place. And James Gunn later said, no, we'd never really talked to him. So you can take that for all for what you will. But this film is going to be directed by Luca Guadagnino, and it is going to be taking place in the past, obviously during World War II is my presumption. So then now we're waiting for who is going to replace Daniel Craig, at least for the frontrunner. So then, as I was doing research to find topics for the show, and I was going to, just following my sources and things like that, I saw all the headlines. And I stopped and I said, that this actor, who it seems like is the new frontrunner to play Sergeant Rock, is probably one of the last people that I would have pictured, to play Sergeant Rock. And it's mostly because he's already involved with the DC universe, although not the DCU, but the DC just general universe, right? And that is Colin Farrell. Apparently, according to Deadline, Colin Farrell is the frontrunner to be Sergeant Rock. So let's read a little bit from this article, and we'll talk about it on the other side as we usually do. Quote, after winning practically every single award out there for his turn in The Penguin, which he did, by the way, he won so many awards for that, which he deserves. Colin Farrell is looking to get back in business with DC, and that's to star in the title role of Luca Guadagnino's Sergeant Rock. Like I mentioned, he's the one directing it. Continue on with the quote, note this is a different part of the DC verse. This is very important. This is me interjecting. This is very important. We're going to talk about this on the other side. Because hopefully this puts to bed a lot of the conversations that I'm not... Well, we'll talk about it on the other side. So anyways, quote, note this is a different part of the DC verse with the Penguin attributed to Matt Reeves' The Batman sphere, whereas Sergeant Rock is part of DC bosses James Gunn and Peter Safran's, it says oversee, I'm going to say oversight, I don't know. The two worlds shall never overlap. Okay, so first of all, let's get to that really quickly. That this is not coming from DC themselves, although James Gunn has said it himself, so I just don't understand why this conversation is still happening. Again, whether or not you want Robert Pattinson's Batman to be the DCU's Batman is a different question. And we've talked about this on the YouTube channel. We've talked about this on the podcast, whether it's a good idea or not. I don't think it's a good idea at all. And I've given my explanation for that. That's just my personal opinion, regardless of what is actually objectively happening. Because what is objectively happening is that Robert Pattinson's Batman is not going to be a part of the DCU. And if you needed further proof, this is further proof. Again, if you think it's a good idea, that we can have that conversation. We have had that conversation. I've had that conversation with people in the comments, and I'd love to continue having that conversation with people in the comments, obviously respectfully. But for those people who think it's still going to happen, I don't understand. If Colin Farrell is cast as Sergeant Rock, this is the nail in the coffin. This is the definition of nail in the coffin. So I just wanted to put that out there, that if Colin Farrell is going to be playing Sergeant Rock, it's about as official gets. The Penguin universe, the Batman universe, is not the same as the DCU. Just want to put that out there because this is a very clear implication of this news. Talking about the news itself, Colin Farrell is an amazing actor. And if you guys saw The Penguin, if you guys have seen anything Colin Farrell has been in, he's quietly one of the most underrated actors working in Hollywood today. And perhaps not quietly anymore, although he didn't get Oscar attention. He got Oscar attention last year for the Banshees of Inisherin, but he got all the Emmy attention for his role as Oz Cobb in The Penguin. So I think it's clear that this is, like I say, you get talent to be in these roles, right? And Colin Farrell is super, super talented. So I think, as long as, by the way, because people have been saying, people from DC have been saying, are we going to get a Penguin season 2? I don't know. It doesn't seem likely. Maybe yes, maybe no, right? We've been getting conflicting answers from people at DC. And so as long as this doesn't prevent him from being a part of the DCU, not in terms of canon, but in terms of scheduling, then I'm all for it. I think this is a great choice. I thought Daniel Craig was a great choice to play a very grizzled World War II veteran. I think Colin Farrell can pull it off just as well. So I think this is exciting, and we'll have to see what this turns into. Guys, what do you think about the news that Colin Farrell is, circling? So does he have an offer? It's not entirely clear, but he is the front runner to play Sergeant Rock after Daniel Craig leaves. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, we talked a little bit ago about the fact that James Gunn is going to be pre-writing, or he is currently pre-writing the next project in the DCU. And we talked about the fact that, it could be anything, but also, is there a little bit too much going on for the co-CEO's plate? Especially given the news we talked about last week, where we talked about the fact that there is pressure really mounting on Superman. Not only is there pressure mounting on Superman, we didn't touch on this a whole lot because this was just a little bit of speculation, I think, on the part of a lot of these reports, but not only would, if Superman doesn't succeed box office-wise critically, then Warner Brothers might be in some trouble, but on top of that, they are looking to maybe fire the current heads of their movie divisions and replace them with none other than Peter Safran, who is the co-CEO of DC alongside James Gunn. Not only that, but he is the more business-oriented CEO of DC Studios because James Gunn currently is doing most of the creative work. And that's all well and good, right? And I've talked about the fact that, I've enjoyed everything that James Gunn has made thus far in the comic book movie space, maybe with the exception of Creature Commandos, which I thought was okay, which I thought was fine. And that's a little concerning to me because Creature Commandos was well, it's the first project in the DCU, and it is really James Gunn, full James Gunn. And I thought this is probably the worst thing he's done in terms of the 3 Guardians films, Peacemaker, and the Suicide Squad. But he is directing Superman, and we'll all have to wait and see for that. He's also been very adamant that we're going to see Peacemaker later on this year, Peacemaker Season 2, although technically Season 1 is the DCEU, it's all complicated, it's all weird. And then he said he was going to be pre-writing another DCU project that I assume is separate from Creature Commando Season 2, which I'm sure he's going to write as well. And so now he's given a little bit more clarity on what that might look like. Just a little bit, but I think it's enough to speculate on a couple interesting possibilities. So he was at a convention, and he had this to say about the next project. He said, quote, "I am writing and directing something else that would be the next directing thing. It's about ... He pauses, I think. It's complicated." The next quote, "I'm writing something that's within the DCU. That's my next project." So I think people have taken that to mean that it is going to be directly connected with the Superman film. It's connected, right? He says, I believe somewhere else he does mention directly that it's connected to the Superman film. I'm not entirely sure, but I think for the most part, the takeaways from that is that, yes, this is going to be something that is directly connected to Superman. So what could this next project be? Few obvious options here. Number 1, Superman 2, right? Maybe he's so confident in the Superman film, and that's a good thing, right? I mean, maybe that means that they're all so happy with the Superman film and everything's great and everything's going well, that he's like, I'm already just working on Superman 2. Great. Okay, let's see if that happens. The other one that immediately comes to mind, other than maybe a Green Lanterns project, maybe he loves Guy Gardner so much that he wants to direct a Green Lanterns movie after, the Lantern show. I don't know. Maybe it's something to do with Supergirl again after maybe it's a Superman Supergirl team up movie or something like that. I don't even know. The one that jumps to my mind though, and this is only because he directly mentioned this in his announcement for all the DCU projects when he did that all those years ago. This is now 2 or 3 years ago when he announced all the DCU projects, and that is the Authority. The Authority, right, we talked about a few weeks ago that, the fact that James Gunn was giving a bunch of updates on all these DCU projects, and the Authority was one where I believe they were just not happy with the script, and they were not happy with the way that things were going, and so it's been stalled. But if you remember, going back to that original announcement video that James Gunn made, the Authority, he said, I think he said something like a passion project of his or something like that. It's one that he seemed more particularly excited about. And that, I mean, if you know James Gunn, it's in the realm, right? It's in the right realm. Suicide Squad and Peacemaker and Guardians, it's in that realm. It definitely is. And the Authority, at least one member of the Authority, is going to be introduced. In fact, we just got a new image from James Gunn of the Engineer, one of the members of the Authority. He just released a new image of the Engineer. So, if I had to put money on it, and I'm not going to, I would say the next project most likely is probably going to be the Authority. It's interesting that he doesn't want to say it outright if it is in fact the case, because the Authority, it makes sense. It's something it seems like he'd want to do. It seems like it's something that is obviously connected to Superman. It just seems, odd that he wouldn't just say it outright, because that's a project that has been announced, officially, unofficially. And for all we know, by the way, I mean, we're going to watch Superman, and there's going to be this whole subplot with Wonder Woman in the movie, which, I don't know, maybe it'll be great. But then maybe he'll want to direct a Wonder Woman movie. Or maybe, he's going to want to make a Daily Planet movie. I don't know. With Rachel Brosnahan as the lead. Who knows? Nobody knows. So, I mean, this is all discounting the fact that it could be just something we don't even know about in the movie thus far. Again, I will reiterate my point from previous segments that you can go check out, where I said it's great and all that James Gunn is being so hands-on. At what point does it just become the James Gunn cinematic universe? And at what point does it become too much? Because he has responsibilities too to oversee the story that's going on holistically. So I don't know what that point is. I'm truly asking questions that I know I'm not going to receive answers for, but they're not rhetorical. I really would like to know, what is the balance, right? Because he said he's been so busy, and I just hope that this doesn't become to a point where it really reaches that tipping point where he's like, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, and I need to take control of everything. And I don't think that's the case, but we'll have to see. So guys, what do you think about the news that James Gunn's next project is allegedly connected to Superman in some way? Let me know in the comments down below. All right, guys, so at this point, we have a lot of MCU projects up in the pipeline, but really at this point, all eyes are on 2 movies in particular, Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, because the multiverse saga, and not all of it has been necessarily just the fault of creatives per se. It's not been, oh, Marvel's hired terrible writers and terrible directors and they just haven't delivered. There's been a lot of other external factors, not to make excuses, right? Not to make excuses. We don't make excuses, for example, for the DCU when all the stuff with Warner Brothers was going on during that turmoil. So not to make excuses, but, in terms of the inner politics within Disney, within the CEO switches, within the just different random things that happened that weren't foreseen, like Chadwick Boseman passing away. Phase 4 and Phase 5 and now Phase 6 they've just been messy, right? And so we're all just kind of waiting. Okay, let's see what's going to happen. Let's just kind of get a reset going, and hopefully after Avengers: Secret Wars, there's going to be some kind of reset heading into the next phase where Marvel can return to form. And it looks like we're maybe heading in that direction, hopefully. You're hoping Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four and Ironheart seems like a vestige of the original regime, so I'm not really going to put my hopes on Ironheart, but Wonder Man and Vision and Spider-Man 4, it looks like we're heading in a good direction, but we'll have to see about that. So interestingly, the Russos, who have been promoting their new film, The Electric State, which I hear is terrible. I haven't seen it myself, so I don't know, but I hear it's terrible. They have been talking about these two films. They've been talking about what these two films are going to be, and they actually gave a quote that I find fascinating, and I think actually is a very healthy and very good way to look at what these two films are going to be. So I'm reading a couple quotes, or I'm just going to read one quote here from the direct, but they gave some other quotes just saying how exhausting it is to make these two films, that Anthony Russo got pneumonia after filming Infinity War, and they took a 4-week break before doing Endgame, which is crazy. That is absolutely crazy. So kudos to them. These two films, I think they said they have something like a bunch of trading cards where they're just trying to pin down every single character and where they are in the story. It's crazy. I fully respect them for doing this. I mean, only 2 sets of directors, Joss Whedon and now the Russo brothers, have ever directed Avengers films, and it is no small task. So, and the fact that all of them work to some degree, and Age of Ultron probably being the weakest one, is still an enjoyable movie is crazy. It's really crazy. So, really respect them for that. But this quote here that I wanted to talk about, I think shed some light on how they're viewing these two movies, and I think how we should view these two movies, not comparing them to Infinity War and Endgame. So this is what I think Joe Russo had to say. Quote, "What's compelling about these two new Avengers movies is they're a beginning. It's a new beginning. So we told an ending story, now we're going to tell a beginning story, and then who knows where we all go from there. Maybe there'll be another 5 years, but I think we just needed that time and perspective to figure out where it needed to go next, and the only thing that brought us back was the right story." Okay, so for a long time, a lot of us have been looking at these two films, Avengers: Doomsday and Avengers: Secret Wars, as another culmination of the multiverse saga, and it is that. It definitely is that, right? And I would argue, for example, the first Avengers, right, 2012's Avengers, is an ending. It's a culmination of bringing together all 6 of those, or all 5 of the previous films into the 6th film that was the Avengers. But in a way, the Avengers was a new beginning into a new era of the MCU where all these heroes were interconnected now, and you had all these different things going on, and that built up to something even grander and something bigger. I think we've all, myself included, been looking at Doomsday and Secret Wars as a pseudo-quasi-Infinity War Endgame, which was going to be a grand conclusion to the Infinity Saga, and it was going to bring everything together and tie it up into a nice little bow, and then move on, right? And it wasn't going to, it was just going to be a definitive ending. And I thought that, and I was worried about that, because I was like, well, if you're going to have a definitive ending or whatever you're going to do, there's not a whole lot to definitively end, because there are just so many things that are dangling up in the air. I mean, if you're not going to have Moon Knight, if you're not going to have She-Hulk or whatever, I think they will have She-Hulk probably, but, for example, Moon Knight or Blade or Werewolf by Night, like, where are all these characters? If Agatha doesn't show up, then what? And I think if you're thinking about it as an ending, it's a little concerning. But if you're thinking about this, like the Russos are, as a new beginning, I think it makes a lot more sense, actually. Now, Doomsday and Secret Wars are still going to tie up a lot of things that have been going on in the multiverse saga, and hopefully put to rest this whole multiverse-ness, so we can move on to mutants and cosmic and whatever is going to come next. Hopefully better quality, right, in general. But I think that in terms of looking at these two films as a jumping off point, and yes, this does put fuel to the fire of those rumors that, the multiverse is going to collapse and all the Earths are going to come together in some way, and it's going to, mutants and Fantastic Four, etc. I think that makes a lot of sense, right, in terms of a new beginning, and I think mutants are definitely a big part of that. So I think this is actually really encouraging, because now it's like we're unburdened to say, well, why isn't it tying up this thing, and why isn't it tying up that? Guys, remember Endgame had literally almost every single character in the MCU ever in that final shot, right? Where before they jump into battle. I don't think Doomsday and Secret Wars is going to be like that, honestly. I think for sure they're going to have a lot of cameos, and Toby and Andrew and Hugh are probably going to show up, and it's going to be fun. But I think it's going to be different, and I think that this is actually a really encouraging way for them to look at it and position these two films. So guys, what do you think about the Russo's comments that Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars are not going to be an ending necessarily, but they're going to be a new beginning for the MCU? Let me know in the comments down below. And guys, that will do it for episode number 69 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Thank you so much for joining. As always, make sure to subscribe. Give this video a like if you're listening and watching on YouTube. If you're checking it out on the Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Overcast, or the audio platforms, let me know what you think about the audio platforms by giving it a rating. And guys, thank you so much. It means the world to me that you guys decide to take some time out of your days to just check out some thoughts. And I'd love to engage with you guys in the comments of the YouTube videos. So make sure to leave your thoughts down there. That will do it from me, from the Access Blockbusters Pod, and I will see you guys in the next one.